Hello everyone, welcome. Are you ready to build a live stock prices chart with real-time data? In this video, I will show you how to connect React and Node.js to create an interactive line chart that updates every second using ChartJS and server-sent events. By the end, you will have a working stock chart that's both real-time and dynamic. So let's get started. Now I am in my VS Code. Here, as you can see, I have created one basic React app. I have removed all the jargon code that comes when you initialize the React app. I have only kept the app.js where I have removed all the other code that is inside this. All the logos and everything is removed. So let's first create our backend. So first let me quickly create one folder, backend. Let's go inside this folder. Yep. Now inside this backend, let's just go ahead and do npm init. We'll initialize our package.json inside this. Okay, once this is there, let's go ahead and install our Express. Because we are using Node.js, and usually when you are using Node.js, we usually use the Express.js package. So Express.js is a package which helps us to create a server very easily, and it makes our code very easy to read instead of using the legacy of HTTP that people were using. So that's why Express framework came up. So now we will go ahead and use Express. Along with this, we will use NodeMon because we don't want to continuously whenever we do any changes in our server file, we don't want to manually rerun the server. It needs to, whenever we do any change, it needs to just rerun itself. So that's why NodeMon package is used. We will also go ahead and install the CORS. So CORS is a cross origin policy package which helps us to mitigate that issue. So because our server will be residing in a port 5000 and our the React app will be on localhost 3000, and both the ports are different. So browser will throw us an CORS error that because we are not serving our front end from our server itself, it will throw us an issue for CORS, the cross origin policy issue. So to mitigate that, we need to use CORS. So let's just go ahead and install this as well. Okay, it is installed. Let's just go ahead and create one server file. So we can use touch server.js. This will directly go ahead and create our server.js file. You can also just click on this and create the file as well. So once this is created, let's just import our Express, const Express require Express. Then let's just go ahead and import CORS as well. Okay, let's initialize our Express, app equals to Express. We will just go ahead and use our CORS at the top of the file so that all the requests coming to this server will be CORS will help us to mitigate that issue as well. Then we will go ahead and use app.listen. So we need it to listen at some port. So listen will expect whenever you use the listen function, this expects us to pass it a port as well as one callback callback that needs to be that is usually needs to be printed here. So we'll just go ahead and create one port. We will use 5000 port here. Let's just go ahead and pass this as well. So we will have our port. We'll create one callback function which will be just console.log listening on port 5000. So now our basic server is created and our listener is also created. Let's just go ahead and see if it's properly running. Let's just npm start. And as you can see, it is showing us listening on 5000. To use the NodeMon, what we will do is we can just quickly do one thing. We will go to our package.json. Here in the scripts, we can go ahead and use this. So whenever you do npm.start, we need to actually run our NodeMon. So we'll just use NodeMon and server.js. So now let's just go ahead and do npm start. So as you can see, it has taken NodeMon, and because we on npm start we need to actually, instead of using node server.js which is by default used, we will use NodeMon server.js. That's why we have gone into package.json to write this. Okay, so now as this is completed, let's start by creating our API first. So let's just go ahead. Okay, so we will start by creating our API. So we'll use one app.get because we are creating a get API for getting all the stock data that is needed. So we will use this stock data. This will be our API's endpoint. We will have our request, response, because we're using a get API, we have passed the string. The string where we use the stock data is the one where the front end needs to make the request, like local 5000 / stock data, and then we need to write one callback which will take request and response that we need to actually send to our user the response. So here we will go ahead and quickly let's set our headers first. So response dot set header. So first we need to set our content type, because this will be a stream of data that we will be passing. So there are different types of content type. There is application JSON, there is plain text, and etc and etc. But currently for our use, we will be creating this as this will be a content type of a event stream, because this data, because this API will continuously throw the data, whatever data we will have, towards our front end. So that's why this content type needs to be of text event stream. So we have our first header set. Then we will need to also set one more header of our cache. So usually what happens is browser caches the data that the user is sending. So this is a default behavior of any browser, because we will be continuously sending every 2 seconds or 1 second. We will be sending the data. So we don't want to cache any of the values, so that no stale data is there in our front end. So we'll just use cache control, and this will be no cache. So this is also done. Then we can just go ahead and create one more header. So this will be our final header for our connection. So what happens is, usually we'll keep the connection as keep alive. Usually what happens is, whenever we send the data, whenever we call any API from the front end and the data is sent, the connection is closed, so that the connection is not kept open, because there can be any man in the middle attack or any such kind of attacks can happen. But because this will be a stream of data, we need to keep the connection open, so that every 1 second we are getting the updated data, so we don't need to make multiple API calls. So we will use this connection keep alive as the header, so that our browser knows that this connection needs to be alive and doesn't need to be closed. Once this is there, we will use res.write. So usually what happens is, we use res.send or res.json or res.send file. This is the case whenever we want to use server sent events, we need to use something called as response.write. So write helps us to get the stream data that we have. Whenever we want to stream any of the data, we need to use this response.write. This helps the browser to know that this will be a stream of data that is coming along with the header. The write helps the browser to understand is that the data will be coming in such a format that it will be a stream format, and the connection needs to be open as well. So that's why we will be using the response.write here. So now response.write, whenever we use response.write, the data needs to be sent in a certain format. So it needs to start with the data as a keyword, then colon, then whatever data. So let's say if I am sending any dummy text, so that dummy data, in this case we will be creating one function which will return us the proper JSON value, a JSON structure that we will be creating for our stock, that will be created, and then we will stringify and pass it. But currently I am just keeping it as a dummy. And then whenever once whatever data you are passing, at the end of it we need to use this next line and the next line 2 times. So this is how the pattern is whenever you use response.write. So now let's just go ahead and create our generate stock data. So here I have already actually created one generate stock data function. I will just quickly copy paste it here. So yeah, so as you can see, we have one generate stock data function here. Inside this I have used random change. So everywhere we have just used a mat.random. We have just multiplied by 2 and fixed it to a certain values. There is open, close, all of these are just random values, random jargon values that is created just to match to some random stock data that we had. So we have just created a random change, open and close. With this we are just returning one big object where we are passing a symbol. Symbol will be any of the name or anything. You can pass any random name. Then there is a name of the company. There is an exchange if it's a New York Stock Exchange or a Indian Stock Exchange if you want. We have the currency. Then we have a date time. Then we have open. This is coming from here directly. We have high. We have low. Any of the values of the high and the low of that day. Then there is a close as well, so at what value it has been closed, at what it has been opened. Then we have the volume, the continuous flow of volume. Then we have the previous close, that has been done. Then the change that has been there, and an average volume. These are all just random values. You can fill anything what you want out of this function, and this will just return us this big object from here. So now we will quickly go ahead and call this generate stock data. Instead of this dummy, what we will do is we will quickly go ahead and use json.stringify. So let me use it here. json.stringify. Here we will call our generate stock data function. So this res.write, here we will just stringify whatever the data. So this data that will come with random values and everything, we will just stringify it and pass it as soon as the stock data API is hit from our front end. Once, so this will give us the first initial value as soon as the user as soon as our front end hits this API. Once this is done, what we will do is we will quickly go ahead and create our intervals, because on each interval, let's say of 1 second, 2 second, or any of the values that you want to keep it. In this case we will keep it as 2 second. So every 2 second we need to again call our generate stock data. It will give us some random values, and then we will pass that inside a response. So we will quickly create one function, send stock data. So this will be just a simple anonymous function where we will get our data from our generate stock data. This will give us that random data that we had, and here we will just quickly use res.write, and we'll just copy this directly here, and here we will directly use our data. So we have our send stock data. Now on each interval we need to call this send stock data. So what we will do is we will create our interval ID. I will tell you the use of this interval ID in just a minute. Then we will quickly call our set interval function. Here we will set interval function take two values, the function that needs to be the callback that needs to be done after, and the time after which this callback needs to be called. So we need to call our send stock data function after every 2 seconds. Because it takes the values in millisecond, we need to pass 2000 here for 2 seconds. Now we will use this interval ID. So what happens is because this request will continue once we have from the front end, once we have hit this API, this because of the keep alive, this this request will be opened, and once if due to some reason user server has closed, or from front end it has been closed and this API is failed or something like that happens, this interval needs to be cleaned up. So we need to write one cleanup function. So what we will do is on request we get one on listener where we will listen for a close event. So at any time this request is closed, we need to just quickly go ahead and clear our interval. So we are doing this so that because this interval is open, and it will because it will just keep on for every 2 seconds, it will just keep on calling this send stock data, and but this request has been closed, we need to actually clear this interval. So we need to go ahead and clear interval. By clearing our interval, we will actually freeing up our memory which has been used, and then we will just use response.end as well. Yes. So this is how our full API is now ready. So this API will once from the front end, if we hit our stock data API, it will initially give us the first generate stock data that it will come, and then after every 2 seconds it will start throwing us this data. So we have completed our backend part. Let's go ahead and start with our front end. So let me quickly go inside my source app.js, and let's just go ahead and create one file, stock chart.js. Let me quickly go ahead and install few of the things as well. Okay, let's just create one git bash terminal. So we will go ahead and install our Chart.js. So because we need the line graph here, we need to install a library called as Chart.js. Then we will also need one more library called as ReactJS 2. So ReactJS 2 is kind of a wrapper around Chart.js, which helps us because our data will be coming up continuously. So it needs to be it needs to change the line graph that we have needs to adapt to the data that is coming to it, and it just needs to react to the data that is coming. So instead of by using only Chart.js as well, we can do this, but it's a very lengthy kind of a change that needs to do. So that's why we'll use React Chart.js 2, which is built only for purposes like this, to make our Chart.js library more reactive. So we'll use this as well. So let's just quickly go ahead and install this. And once this is installed, okay, so now this has been installed. Okay, we will quickly go ahead and start by creating our useState hook. So first we will just quickly create our data, set data. We'll use our useState hook. Inside the useState, we will actually create one object. So our data will be a big object that we'll have. It will have labels, which will be an array. Initially it will be empty. Then we will have our data sets, which will also be an array. It will be an array of our label. We will just quickly just give some value of stock price. This is the label that will be shown on our line chart above. Then we will have our data, the actual data that needs to be shown. Initially it will be empty. Then we will have some border color. You can keep it anything. I will be just keeping it something that I have found pretty interesting for this. So 75, 192, 192 and 1. And then once we have this, we will use fill as false. So if you want, you can make this fill as true as well. So if this fill is true, then usually what happens in a line graph, when there are multiple values, if a line graph has, let's say, a value of 50 and the other values of 30, so it will create a kind of a, you can see a triangle kind of a shape, and whatever the space is in between the triangle is filled. So that fill, we don't want to do any of those fill. That's why I have kept it as a false. You can add if you want to. You can make it as true, and it will be that the value, the difference in between the value is there, that will be filled with a very minimum opacity color. And we will also need one symbol. So symbol will be basically the name of the company that we want to show here. So all of this will be in our data. So once our data is created, we can just quickly create our small UI here. So I will just use some inline styles to give it a width of 90%. We don't want to use the 100% of the space, because this is a reactive chart that will be coming up line graph, so it might go out of the screen and introduce those scroll bars and everything. We don't want that, so that's why I will just keep the height as 90 view height. So okay, this is done. Once this is there, we will have an h2 where we will just write live stock prices for we will directly use our data here. So data dot symbol. I'm just using optional chaining because the data will be coming from API, and it sometimes might be data might be empty or anything. We will just use optional chaining here just for safety purposes. Once this is there, we can then use line, which will be coming from our React Chart.js 2. Inside this line, this will be our line graph where we need to pass our data. So this data will be actually equal to our data that we have created. So this is how the data format would be there, the labels and the data sets and the symbol and the other data that we have passed. So we need this data. Inside this, we need to also pass options. So options is nothing but an object, like an object of an object, where we need to pass the scales. So scales is nothing but the x and y, the x and y title and the display text that we need to show here. So in the x, we want the title to be, so we'll use one display property here. So because we want to show the title, we will use display true, and the text that we want to show is time. So this will be in the horizontal line, and in the horizontal we want the time to be shown, the current time. Then in the y direction, we will just go ahead and create title, display. We want in the vertical as well, we want to show, so display true, and the text we will just keep as price in USD. Okay, so we have our x and y as well, and I think so we are good with our line graph as well. So we have our initial state created, we have our line graph created. So now we need to go ahead and make our API call. So let's just use our use effect hook to make that API call as well. So we'll go ahead and create our use effect hook. Okay, this needs to be done only once, so we'll just add our dependency area, keep our dependency area empty because we only want to do the API call once. Then we will go ahead and use our event source. So event source actually helps us to handle all the real-time data. So JavaScript has created a built-in framework. So we will just quickly use our new event source, and everything from API call to handling all the data. So even if the connection drops or any of the reconnection that needs to be happen, all of this is handled by event source in just one line. So we will directly go ahead and use this event source here. Just go ahead and make our API call HTTP to our localhost 5000 and our API endpoint stock data. So now our whole API, the whole API calling, handling, everything will be done by event source itself, and we will get it in our event source that we have created a variable event source. Once it is there, what we will do is we will just quickly go ahead and do event source dot on message. So inside our on message, we will get one event. Inside this callback, we will actually get one event, and this event will actually hold our data that will be sent from our stock data API. The get API will the response that will be sent will be inside this event that we have gotten from this on message. So we'll just quickly go ahead and get our stock data, and this will be nothing but we need to actually parse this because this will be sent in the form of stringified version from our response. So we will parse our event.data. Once that is there, we will just quickly go ahead and create a new time because we are showing according to the time. Just quickly go ahead and create new date. We will have our stock data dot date time. We actually have a date time there as well inside our stock data, that the event.data that we have sent inside the response. We also have the date time, so we are just passing that and creating a new using new date. We are just converting it to our the local time string. Just quickly go ahead and to our local time string. So now we have our new time as well. So now we can just go ahead and set our data. So we just go ahead and use set data. Here we will just get the previous data because now we are continuously setting our use state hook. So we actually need the previous data, and then we need to add our data that is currently come. So because now the connection will be keep alive, so every 2 seconds we will be getting the data. So whatever was previously stored in our datasets object, we need to just now continuously update it with the updated data. So that's why what we will do is we will create this anonymous function. We will get the previous data. Inside this, we will first have our labels. So let's just go ahead and call our labels. Let me just wrap this properly. So this whole function will be wrapped like this. So in this we will have our labels. Inside our labels, we will have an array because our labels is an array. As you can see inside this, we have an labels as an array. So we will have our whatever was in we have just used spread operator. So whatever labels was there initially inside our previous data, we will have that, and that label is actually because we are showing the time inside that label. So the X label that you are seeing, we will be actually showing time. So we will just use a new time there. So whatever was the previous time, the new time that will be coming will be continuously added to that array. And what we will do is we will just use some slice and use -10 because we want to only show the the 10 values out of it. So we don't want because it will continuously send you like 50-60 values. It will be just keep on sending you the values, and we don't want to show all of those values. So we will just slice it to the last 10 values that we have. Once we have our labels, similarly we will create our data sets. It will be an array, an object where we will have our previous data, data sets 0th, because this will be because every time we will have the previous data will be of the 0th value of the data that we have, and then the new data will be added above it. And then we have our data, where we will have our previous data dot data sets of 0 dot data. Inside it I want to add my current stock datas. So here you can use, because from our server, as you can see, the JSON that will be returning, it has open, which also has some random values. It will be at the high, low, the close, volume, previous close, any of those you can use to see the data of any of those that will be changing. In this case I will just write close, whatever was the closing value of the from the stock, that is what I'm just choosing here. You can add any of those, you can use high, low, open, any of those if you want, and see the changes in your the graph. And I will just slice it to last 10 values. Once this is done, this is also completed, we'll just quickly go ahead and have my symbol as well. So we have our symbol, we'll just use stock data dot symbol. So we have our symbol as well. Once this is there, we will just write one cleanup function quickly. So just use return, and let's just quickly use event source dot close. So we have our cleanup function as well. So I think so we are good with all of those. Let's see it in action now. Just quickly go ahead and do npm start. Okay, let's open it in some other port. Okay. Actually forgot to do one more thing. We need to actually call the stock chart inside our app.js. So let's just quickly go ahead and call our stock chart. And now I have just run my app. So as you can see, there is an issue. Okay, so we are getting undefined. Let us quickly debug this as well. Okay, so one of the issue is because our data sets are, the S is bigger here, right? This needs to be small. This is because this data is directly passed to our line graph, and the line graph actually expected, the naming convention is with data sets with S is small. And there is one more thing we actually forgot to import. So we need to actually go ahead and import our Chart.js auto, because our the rep ChartJS 2 is also interdependent on the Chart.js itself. So that's why we need to import that as well. So now if we quickly go ahead and see our app, let me reload it. Let me close this as well. Yes, so now as you can see, every 2 seconds we are getting an API call, and our line graph is now moving. You can see we are also able to see the time here as well, and every 2 seconds the data is coming here. It's pretty interesting. Yes, it looks good as well. Our symbol is also here. All the data we have set for the price is also here, and and we are only able to see because we have used the slice 10. That's why these 10 values are also here. We can actually also go ahead and quickly change some of the values here as well. So if you want to, instead of close, if you want to see open, we can just change it to open, and you can see some different values will be coming here. We can also go ahead and change this to high, low, or anything, and you can see the whole graph now has changed. So let me just keep it close only. Yeah, it looks good as well. Every you can also change the second. You can make it to 5, 1, or anything. Anyhow, if like this will continuously just send us the request at that many of seconds, and our graph will change according to it. So that's it. We have our fully functional real-time stock price tracker built with React, Node.js, and Chart.js. If you enjoyed building this, make sure to give the video a thumbs up, and don't forget to subscribe for more tutorials on web development and real-time applications. Let me know in the comments if you have any questions or suggestions for future projects. See you in the next one.